everybody, to Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate, a journey of emotional resilience. I'm your host, Brandon, and we have another exciting journey segment for you today. I'm really excited to have Chris Elliott on as our guest, and just the messaging that she brings is so positive, so powerful, and just another really good example of even when we go through things in those tough moments in life, we can still share a positive message and still bring positivity to what can be a hard, dark world sometimes. So welcome, Chris. I'm very thankful that you were able to join us today.
Oh, right back at you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, kind of just to start off, I wanted to ask you, where do you see the power in sharing your experience and kind of being vulnerable and being honest about, where you've been, what you've gone through, and then how where you see the power in that messaging to say, like, even though this is where I've been, this is the positivity I can still bring to you.
Where do I see the power in sharing and vulnerability?
Yeah.
I believe that is the crux and the essence of life. And at the end of the day, our purpose for experiencing this iteration of creation, especially given the world in which we live now, where it's a lot of residual constructs and conditioning, and you're, especially in our Western world, forced to stay small, individual, closed, and just, you got to get through to the next day to pay those bills, go to school, whatever it is. But, keep your head down and don't look in. I think that's the antithesis of why we're supposed to be here. Life is so much richer when you, allow yourself to experience the fullness of life and share that with other people and receive the fullness of their experiences as well. Because then it expands your own horizon, so to speak. It can expand your own perspective on life. There's no possible way one human being can experience all that there is to experience in life, right? But we can vicariously if we allow ourselves to connect and to share and to learn from each other and to help each other grow and heal. And so that, again, to bring it back on home, very long-winded way of saying, it is all the power, I believe. It is why we are here, in my humble opinion. Because otherwise, too, why go through all of this and learn all of these lessons and not share it?
Yeah, no, I agree. I love that answer, and I 100% agree with that. It is so powerful, and it's what life is all about, being vulnerable and sharing those experiences. And not only, you sharing yours, but I liked what you said about like taking other people's in, because I think that's where we learn the most for ourselves, and we can have the most self growth is when we listen to other people and say, oh yeah, I didn't see it from that way, or I haven't tried that yet. And then that opens up more doors for us to continue our own growth and in finding happiness in life.
Right. And you hit a very important nail on the head. And that is, sharing isn't just a one-way street, right? Like, it's not just a giving and a spewing of information. It's also an opening and a receiving and an ingesting and an absorbing of. And that's the connective tissue between us all if we do that. I think there is a tendency to westernize this a spiritual way of being, right? Like, you can make a quick buck on telling somebody to, like, just love, laugh, and lead with light, right? Like, I'm not interested in that. And for those people who are doing that, kudos to you. And I think that a lot of people do understand sharing to be just like, I must be open. I must just share and spew. But I love that you brought it back home and remind folks that, like, yeah, it's the give and the take. You have to receive just as much as you give in order to really be participating and sharing.
Yeah, no, and I love that, because that's where I've just learned so much. I mean, those moments where I've shared my story and been vulnerable and have those conversations, it's also brought a lot of growth and just realization. And it keeps me on my toes, right? When I'm having to look at myself and say, like, oh yeah, I still got to continue to work on this. Or as I'm talking, I'm like, oh man, I still struggle with that. So I got to kind of make sure I'm staying on top of it. But being able to talk to different people and being able to hear their experiences in life is really what I find a lot of joy in. And I love doing it because even though like what I've learned just through life and then the few months I've been doing this is we can be completely different people. Our struggles could be a little bit different, but some of those feelings and emotions of what drove us there or that we've experienced through those different struggles and challenges are pretty similar. So then when you can open up your mind and be willing to try new things and say like, oh, I've still been struggling with this, but now you brought another option that I can
Mhm.
try or another perspective on how to view that challenge, then I can try that and keep applying that to my life to, like I said, and like you've said, to continue that self growth and in search of happiness, which, that's the point, right? We're on here for a short period of time. Let's try to be the happiest and, people that we can be while we're here.
Right. And happy in a very substantive way, right? Happy in a symbiotic, not viral way, right? Joyful, peaceful content,
Mhm.
not in a material way, but in an immaterial, eternal way. And I love you just mentioned something about we all come from different walks of life and have different journeys and different experiences. And when you boil it down, like we all have similar feelings. And I will go so far as to say that we have the same feelings. We might not have the same reaction to the same experience, but if you boil sadness down, if you boil rage down, if you boil love down, it's all the same stuff, right? Like, and I think we get uh, caught up a lot in comparing our feelings. My pain is more so than yours, or your joy is better than mine. And I love to boil it down and bring it back to the similarities versus the differences. You're hurting, and I'm hurting, and hurt is hurt. You're happy, I'm happy, and joy is joy, right? Like we spend a lot of time, I think, comparing ourselves to other people or things or whatever, in a way that diminishes our own hope. Uh, I'm all for being inspired by other things and looking up to things in a way that allows you to pull yourself up as opposed to like, kind of cower down and crawl up in a fetal position and give up. I've been there. I know that feeling. Um, but it's a dangerous game, the comparison game, if you don't have the skill set to separate like the ego from the spirit, right? Like my ego would love to be living in a little mansion and actually not want a mansion. I would love to have a farm, acres. I don't know anything about farming, but I'll learn. I just want to retire, live off the lay of the land, have like spirited people around me, all of us just helping each other get along. Anyone out there, come hit me up, man. I don't know where we're going, but let's go. But oh, I totally lost my train of thought because I got so excited imagining my
Yeah.
future farm. Like, that is so my goal in life. Oh, comparing. Yeah, don't do it. Don't do it if you don't have the skill set to recognize, like I was saying, ego between spirit. My ego wants to be somewhere else. My spirit recognizes I'm on my way there. I'm just not there yet. So I don't have to look at the people and the things that happen around me in a way that's like, oh, that person's catching a break and I'm not, or and I'm not desperate for more money so I can finally get that land. I'm taking every moment as it comes because I know I'm venturing down the path towards my future farm with my future people.
Yeah, I love the comparison part that you brought up. And, just I've experienced that in just sharing my story where,
Mm.
I'm a recovering heroin addict. And so I've been through some different
Good for you.
things. Yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. And some different things in life and some really tough moments. And sometimes when I've shared that, I've had people be like, oh, well, that's worse than what I've gone through. And it's like, well, it's not. It's a different experience, but
It's
you might,
hard
yeah,
hearing that.
yeah,
Like, think
you
about the person or people who've said that to you.
right. And it's just more about, like you said, boiling it down to, my experience and what I went through can be the same, feelings if we boil it down to what you went through, even if it wasn't drugs, even if it
Right.
wasn't, something like
And this is why I do what I do because it breaks my heart when people diminish their own experiences. Everything is freaking relative, man. If I get a paper cut and bleed, I am fine. If what is it? hemophiliac, or the people that like get they can't, their blood doesn't clot, they get a cut and their blood doesn't clot. They could die from a paper cut, right? So like not a traumatic experience for me, definitely a traumatic experience for that person. So again, like everybody needs to walk firmly in their own shoes, absorb as much as they can in their own life while observing everyone else and what's going on around them, but never diminish the size and the scope of your own experience, because it's relative to you. You only know what you know when you know it. And that doesn't always either mean that you're going to do differently either. We know this.
Yeah, exactly. And that analogy, I think, is actually perfect with the paper. I think that's a great analogy to just our different experiences and how we go through different things. But then, it might be less for somebody, but it might be the end of the world for somebody else, or could be the end of the world for somebody else. And once you take away the comparing experiences, then we can boil it down and realize that we have the same feelings in those moments.
Right. And also, like, your journey, nobody else's journey is about your journey, and your journey isn't about anyone else's journey, right? Like, just because I get this a lot where I have friends who are going through something difficult, or, say like, how did you get through it? Like, you seem so much stronger, right? Like, or you must be so much stronger than I am because I'm struggling. And I tell people, like, you are where you are. I've been in therapy for like 12 years now. So when I stub my emotional toe, I'm not raging out against the world because I'm like, oh, I just stubbed my emotional toe. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm going to choose to do to resolve this internal conflict and make sure that whatever, but this is 12 freaking years of every week, hammering this stuff out and being uncomfortable and being honest and learning to do differently and trying and failing or trying and not doing anything perfectly, just trying to do better. That's all. Just try to do better. So yeah, I see a lot of people making their lives about the success or failures of other people's lives, and it's all, y'all got to keep it in perspective, and it's all relative.
Yeah, and just real quick, because I want to get into your experience and your journey, and I like that you said that 12 years of work, right? And that shows that it's not an overnight thing. It's not where it's going to be better, in a week just because you had a really good week. It's something that's constant, and you just sharing that 12 years shows. You've had that 12 years of work, and you're probably going to have 12 more and 20 more and 30 more.
Until I die.
Yeah, right.
This is a marathon, not a sprint. There's no end until you end.
Yeah. And I love, and just because it's a big thing for me that you mentioned being uncomfortable, and being uncomfortable for me is, feeling my feelings. And that's why I did drugs for so long. That's why I drank for so long. Cause I didn't want to feel my feelings. And so, in order to grow, in order to, figure out what happiness is to me and then strive for that, is I have to put myself in uncomfortable positions, because uncomfortable for me is good. Comfortable for me is by myself with a bottle or with a bag and, and just chilling in the dark.
Uncomfortable for everyone is good. That's another issue with this society in which we grew up, is that we are conditioned to avoid or numb or treat discomfort with a pill or with a substance or with something. You're not really taught to ask yourself questions and go in and unpack it, right? Like, if you're uncomfortable, then just like buy something new, take a pill, whatever, like do something. And this manifests in a lot of different ways. A lot of people not just go to heroin or drinking, a lot, like some people, it's not even a form of addiction. And some people rage out. Some people shut down, right? Some people get social anxiety. It manifests in all forms. And all that is the angst of not really sitting with the feeling, being honest with the feeling. I, from my own experience, full-heartedly believe that any suffering I've experienced has simply been from me denying or ignoring the truth.
That's powerful.
For a litany of reasons, right? Like being a kid, you might deny the truth because you don't know what the truth is, right? Or you're being gaslit and saying that truth is actually not very true. But you carry that habituation into your adult life. So then you start gaslighting yourself out of the truth, right? So all of my suffering had, and to this day, I get anxious and uncomfortable and irritated and annoyed. And it's all because I'm experiencing something emotionally that I'm not being honest about and expressing. That's all it is.
Yeah. And what you do today, is that a form of expression for you? You know, is that a form of kind of getting that out there and inspiring some hope in other people?
Oh, the videos that I do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that actually came about for a few reasons. Like I said, I've been in therapy for about 10 to 12 years. I've only been sober for about 6 or 7. So it took me a while to really get there and to get it to
Well,
stick, you know?
congrats on that.
Uh,
That 6 or 7's
thank
a
you.
big number. So congrats.
Thanks. But I, despite what you may think, and however I present in my videos or even in this conversation, I am painfully shy. I am incredibly socially, I felt like, and historically in my life, awkward. Um, and I'm an introvert. And, uh, and so with that said, I also have lived a lot of life and I've experienced a lot of things and I've learned a lot of things. So it got to this point about, well, whenever I started doing these videos, like almost 2 years ago now in October, I was feeling really angsty. I'm creative, but I work in corporate. I'm a project manager at a toy company, not knocking it, pays my mortgage. That's fine. But I'm also like a angsty, starving artist on the inside. I write, I paint, I do a lot of different things, but I've got a lot of shame. That's why I'm still in therapy, and fear of rejection. So it's all stifled. And about 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, I was feeling that angst. And I was like, I have so much to share. And I love talking to people one on one, intimate settings. I take a Lyft ride to and from work. And I live for those Lyft rides. They're only 15 minutes, but I have the deepest conversations with all of my drivers. I love talking about life. I love listening, actually, is what I love to do. I love watching light bulb moments. I love seeing the ice cubes around hearts melt. I live for that. And so COVID happens, you don't go into the office as much, you don't get that human interaction. And since that's what I thrive on and live for, again, angst, getting kicked up. And so I decided, okay, we're going to work on your crippling perfectionism, your fear of being in front of a camera and being rejected. You're going to and you're going to get your stuff out there. You're just going to share it. And if people like it, they like it. If they don't, doesn't matter because it's for you to get some cojones anyway. And so I did it. I started shooting a couple and then I do one take. Well, I try. I try to ramble out about 60 seconds. If I get to like 5 or 7 and I'm not making any sense, I'll pause and collect my thoughts. But I do one take and I don't allow myself to watch it. I only rewatch it when I put the captions on it or when I'm posting and adding music. But I don't rewatch it. I don't edit it. I won't like film another version of the same one. No, I shoot a whole bunch off and then I post them every day. And it became very cathartic. I've built up a lot, or I shouldn't say built up. I have acquired much more faith in me. I wouldn't say confidence. I would say faith. Because I believe in me and who I am, my heart, my spirit. I believe in that. And so it's expounded that. And then it's also opened up avenues for me to really do what it is that I want to do, which is this kind of stuff. Just talking to people that I don't even know about life, you know?
Yeah,
So
that's awesome.
yeah, yeah. It's been a
And,
great journey.
and
But don't get me twisted. Because there will be moments. There are days where I've got to shoot another batch and I'm like, I have no inspiration. I'm a human. I know in these videos I'm optimistic and positive and smiley because that's what I want to put out. And that is who I am genuinely in every moment of every day. But I do have moments where I struggle. This started with me wanting to inspire people to reconnect with themselves and to go in and to know that how they relate to themselves is a microcosm of the relationships they have outside of themselves. So if you can become more of a friend in here, if you can be more kind to yourself here, you're going to change your whole world out here. It started there. But time's gone on and circumstances have changed. We've got much more global awareness to circumstances that are happening, right? Climate change, genocides, you name it. And I became much less concerned with, well, not that I'm much less concerned with the individual becoming a friend to oneself. I am feeling so much more inspired and a sense of urgency to get you to fucking do that shit now, excuse my language, so
Good.
that we can connect to each other and save ourselves. Because there's so much unnecessary hurt and suffering. This creation, this existence, there's abundance. There's no reason why the few need to rule the masses. Once upon a time, it was not like this. And I'm not saying once upon a time in a fairy tale. I'm saying in real life history, once upon a time, it was not like this. And so the only way I feel like we can get there is if I keep reminding people, like, love yourself, you know what, you're like, you got it, but like also. And so now social media too, it's a tricky game to play because you get these weird shadow bans. I'm a nobody. You know what I mean? And this isn't diminishing my worth by any means. I'm just being objectively honest. Like I'm not Rihanna. I'm not Kim Kardashian. I got 5,000 followers on Instagram. Like it's nothing really to me anyway. But you get shadow banned when you say certain things and you drop certain words. And so it might only be 60 seconds every day that I'm putting out there, but it takes a lot to be crafty, to say these things in a way where you aren't getting, where your message is being suppressed. And that does happen. And then I get demoralized because I'm like, how do you take apart a machine that is, you're in and is 80,000 times larger than you? And constantly, like, you make a little bit of progress and it kicks you back down to start. So all of that to say, like, it's not easy, and I am experiencing everything that I talk about in those videos, and I'm actively doing those things that I suggest to people and challenge people to try in my videos because it's doable. I'm not going to ever say, I'd never say it's easy because people love to, oh, easier said than done, and I know it actually is easy. But I don't like to be argued. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to have a discourse, and have a conversation. But it's doable is what I say. It's doable.
Yeah, it definitely is doable, and there's so much power in what you said there, and so much I want to hit on. And the main thing I want to pull out of that is that connectiveness, right? That
Mhm.
ability to connect to people, because that's kind of where my mind started turning when I decided to do this. Because I've never been big on social media. I hadn't posted on social media in years. Like my wife even made a joke, like, how do you not post anything, and then now you're just posting yourself and posting these videos and doing all this, and I'm like, honestly, I don't know, because I'm self-conscious too. So like I still feel that anxiety and everything behind it. Um, but at the same time, like that's just I feel that same way. Like it just feels like there's a lot of negativity, and it feels like there's a lot of disconnect, and we stopped listening to each other, and we stopped like having compassion and empathy, and it's like, why did we lose that? Where did that go, and
We
why
get it.
did
We're
it?
tired and we're beaten
Yeah.
down. Like, well, it's been groomed out of us, but it's hard to tap. It's harder to tap into now as the veils lift, and more people who need to see the truth are seeing the truth. Right? It's but it's hard because these people do not have the tools they need to deal with the emotional baggage that comes with seeing the truth, with the trauma of understanding and seeing the truth of the world in which we live. And so it's easy to be like, I can't do this. Let me just see the glass half empty, or let me just see the glass not even on the table at all. It's too much. Let me disconnect. It's because and that's what gets coddled because we're all on our own devices. I will be at a restaurant. Groups of people are supposed to be eating together and communing, and everyone's on their phone or taking a picture of the food and then posting it. Oh, so much fun hanging with the girls.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are like? Ugh.
I feel that.
Like, don't
Yep.
drink the Kool-Aid. Take the pill. What is it? Take the red pill.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I completely understand and get that. And that's, and that's why I like that messaging, and I think it's really powerful. And I want to kind of go back to, earlier on in your life, and what kind of started you, on that journey of where you're at today?
Well, I was born October
Yeah.
29, 1980. I
In
where do you
England.
start?
And
I have a lot of my family members, a lot of my family members were alcoholics. So I grew up with that, right? My dad is Black from LA, California. Mom is a white lady from Texas, Huntington Beach. I'm not sure. I can't remember. They met in the military, as we talked about earlier. Popped out two biracial kids, one boy, one girl. I look more ethnically ambiguous. My brother looks more white. And uh, we came out here. My parents divorced when I was 3. My mother did not raise us. Uh, this is hard. I've never actually talked about my mother much. She's still around. My father passed away. And yeah, like knowing potentially she could see this one day, it's hard to want to tell a story. And I just know how much shame she still has wrapped around up. And that's not my responsibility to unpack. It's just hard when you know that the people that you love have stuff they can't work through. You don't want to touch it. Regardless, my parents divorced when I was 3, and my father raised us. And my father was an abusive alcoholic. And so it was not an easy childhood. My brother's 7 years older than me. So when he graduated high school, I was like in 5th grade or 6th grade. And he left the house because him and my father's relationship was volatile, as was mine and my father's. But it was me and my dad after that, once my brother left. But prior to that, I'd been sexually abused, and my father caught this happening and kind of gaslit me into making me think it was my fault. I think I was in 3rd grade at the time, so like 8 years old. And yeah, so that kind of set the tone of our very awkward, precarious, tenuous relationship through the course of my whole life until he passed away. Um, so he'd call me names, he was not pleasant. And the way in which he handled the sexual abuse thing, he kind of ended up sexually abusing me in the midst of trying to find out if it happened. And so all that to say, not a picture perfect father daughter relationship, but it definitely um, formed so much of my identity for a good chunk of my life. I'd say up until my dad died. Um, but also, what it did is, for whatever reason, it drove me into education. I never wanted to be home because I didn't want to be around him. So I just threw myself into school. My best friends in my little baby heart were my teachers. And so I was top of my class, graduated top of my class, went straight to UCLA, paid my own way to get to UCLA. My dad had actually kicked me out of the house when I went to UCLA because I was trying to reestablish a relationship with my mom at that point. She wasn't in our lives after the divorce. And he, I'm sure, was bitter about that. And so it was like, you're on your own. You don't have a home here anymore. So been on my own since I was 17. I'll be 38 this year. My first job was working at In-N-Out. I wasn't really an active alcoholic. I didn't drink. I wasn't the kid in high school who was going to the high school parties and I was quiet. I was a nerd. I was friendly, but I wasn't like a popular kid. We drink every so often, like some peach schnapps because we thought that tasted good. But like, it wasn't me. Same in college.
it's a high school drink right there.
Yeah, right. Or the wine coolers, because that's before they had all the Mike's Hard Lemonade. That I see all the stuff in the store now, and I'm like, ooh, good thing I did not start now. It'd be much harder to quit because everything looks like it tastes so good. But my alcoholism didn't really kick in and become unmanageable until my mid-20s, and that's when I was kind of segueing into like, the workforce. I don't want to say the real workforce because that's very diminishing to the other workforce, but corporate America and like that kind of shit. And I was depressed and I was anxious because I'd been through a lot of trauma. I think the first time I tried to kill myself, I was in 2nd grade. There was a point in high school where I was institutionalized. My high school teachers had called Child Protective Services and they tried to take me out of the house, but my dad denied that he had an issue. And so after the sheriffs left, he basically just like disowned me. This was my sophomore year in high school. And I tried to overdose and kill myself. And then school found out. They ended up institutionalizing me for a week or something like that. And then shortly thereafter, one of my best friends killed herself. She shot herself in the head with a shotgun. So it was a lot of stuff compounded that I carried and had no inclination what to do with, like all of us, I think, prior to current day generations, it's like you go through this fucked up shit in life. All you do is absorb it and you keep pushing. You go to the next milestone, graduate high school, go to college or go to trade school, get the degrees or the certificates and get the job. And then you find the mate and then you get the house and you get the car, whatever, but you're not taught to like keep unpacking these things as you're going through life. And that was just the relationship with my father. His side of the family, that was a whole tenuous relationship as well too. Now my grandmother adores me. My whole adult life, she hated me. She used to tell me that my uncle's dog was a better granddaughter than me. Like, these people were so broken and traumatized, and none of them did any work, right? And why would they? They didn't know it, nor I'm sure did they. And so my alcoholism got increasingly unmanageable, and it wasn't until my dad died, because right before he passed away, I tried to reinsert myself in his life and help. He'd been fired from his job, which I didn't find out until after he died. He told me he retired. He was fired because a kid saw porn on his laptop. Goes to show you what kind of creeper this is. But close to the end of his life, he'd been fired. And so he was just getting he was depreciating like nobody's business. I was getting calls from people like, oh, your dad was just taken to the hospital in ambulance. He was found passed out drunk in his car in the parking lot in front of the liquor store. And I'm like 28, 29, like, okay. I also don't drive, and LA is not convenient where you can just like walk down the block to people's houses. I was up in LA. He's down in like a suburb of Bellflower. So I had to like figure out a way to take care of this man and make sure he, I don't know, wasn't putting anyone else's life in danger, really. So near the end of his life, I ended up, like I said, reinserting myself. I instituted like a neighborhood watch. I went to all of his neighbors' homes, knocked on all their doors, introduced myself, and was like, hey, I'm his daughter. I don't know if you know this, but he's an alcoholic. You might see him passed out, drunk outside one of these days. If that happens, can you call me? Let me know so, I can come and make sure he's okay. And that happens over the course of a couple months, no calls. And then I'm starting to get a couple texts and calls like, hey, his mail is building up, or his car hasn't moved, trash cans haven't moved. God bless the nosy neighbors in these suburbs, on top of me asking. But the things they noticed, I thought was interesting. I'm like, the mail? Oh, wow, okay. For the newspapers. And so I'd go down, I'd try to, he could lock the house from like the inside. So even if you had a key, you couldn't get in. He had to unlock manually from the inside. So I'd go down, try to, knock on the windows, knock on the door, are you okay? Find out he's okay. Get another text, same thing, like mail's building up, car hasn't moved. And so, okay, my brother and I go down. My brother actually gets there first, and he calls me when I'm about 2 blocks from the house and is like, don't bother coming. I was like, I'm already here. I'm going to go. And so I get there and he died in the house. We don't know for how long. We don't know how. Probably a heart attack maybe, or he fell, but it'd been like a week and a half, 2 weeks he'd been gone, we think. We didn't do an autopsy. We don't know. In the middle of a heat wave in the summer. And so when they kicked open the door, the smell of death just like wafted out into the whole little neighborhood, the little cul-de-sac neighborhood. Fire department went in. My father was a hoarder, and he was unclean, unkempt, and alcoholic, right? So they had to walk over like waist high trash and broken bottles to go lift his little melted body up and bring it out of the house. My brother and I have never been through anything like this in our life in terms of like someone dying and us having to deal with it. And I'm an alcoholic. So the first thing I do is I walk down the street and get a little vodka things. I walk back, the cops are talking to me, and I'm like, I'm just chugging on the vodkas. Like, I don't know, bro, talk to my older brother. Oh, man. We ended up having to clean out the house ourselves. I was the one scraping his body juices off of the wooden panel floor. And like, in the cartoons where you like somebody dies and they do like that, you can see like a shadow or an outline.
Mm-hmm.
That was in the wood panel floor. It looked like a shadow, like Peter Pan's shadow. Gross. So all that to say, this did not help my alcohol. It helped me. It helped my recovery. Um, I could not. That experience was the most traumatic. One of the most traumatic experiences I've gone through. Even more so than being actually abused by him and other people. Um, and I remember too at one point after cleaning out the house, I'd gone back to my uncle's house, my father's brother, half brother. My grandmother lived with him because he was a quadriplegic, and my grandmother wouldn't hug me because I smelled like death. She hated my father, and she said that his death was my fault, so I wasn't there to help him. It was like, oh, you are not help our relationship at all. That actually, so very long way of saying that expedited my spiral into rock bottom. A good 2 years, maybe year and a half, 2 years of just getting obliterated at any job I had from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. I was working in Beverly Hills at one point at an agency. I've since gone back to my boss and made my amends and have told people the truth of what I was experiencing, what I was doing. So I can talk about all of this without any shame. But I was working in Beverly Hills. I'd walk home from work and just pass out in the middle of residential neighborhoods on the sidewalk. My best friend, I have no idea. She's got some weird Chris Spidey sense. She would just find me. God bless her heart. She's my angel. Um, she'd find me. I'd get up so plastered. I'd like walk straight into poles. Just these classic stories of just of of self medicating in not a very successful way. And it got to a point where, oh, I should say too, the job I'm currently at, my father's death happened a few months before I started working at this current company. So I'm very grateful to this company because I went through the worst of my life while I was here. Um, for reasons they might not know, and if anyone watches this now, you do. I went on to a couple of medical leaves, and my job was held, and I came back. And when I finally did come back sober, I had to go back. I had to go on 2 medical leaves. The first one didn't. But the second one, that one stuck because I got to a point where I realized I had no other option. I had to do everything differently, or this was going to continue to be the same situation. And because I know what that could look like. I have the mental image of my dad's dead body melting on the floor as a result of alcoholism. I know what that could look like. I won't do that to myself. And so when he died, I realized that I defined my character and my narrative based on my relationship with him. I was never going to get the love that I needed because I can't get it from him. And if I get this job, maybe I'll make him proud and he'll love me and he'll get whatever. It wasn't conscious. But it was, I'm sure, like I wanted him to be proud of me, right? Like whatever. And so my entire life, that was the guiding light. And so when he died, I realized I had a whole new story I could write. And I also had a lot of questions that I wanted answered about the abuse that I experienced as a kid, because all of those memories are very foggy. And so I always wanted to know what we talked about, why he grounded me for my whole fucking 3 month summer vacation and made me. His punishments were like corporal. It was ridiculous. Military man. Have you ever Great Santini? Have you ever seen it? That's my dad. But I had questions that were such big pieces of the luggage, the emotional baggage I was carrying around in my life. So when he died, I was like, I will never get those answers. I'm going to have to put those questions down. And I'm going to have to put this narrative down. And I'm going to have to figure out who the hell I am independent of all this trauma. Oh, okay. So now I guess I'm going to have to unpack this trauma and then see who I am underneath it all. And that's how I eventually ended up getting sober. But it was a long path for me. I mean, everybody gets to their own point at any point in their life, and you get sober and then you relapse or whatever. It is what it is. But I have more importantly figured out that everything I do that is harmful to me is a coping mechanism for something I'm not able to manage emotionally. I smoke cigarettes. I'm so trying to quit. That's like the last thing I do that is like a residual phantom bad habit. So I know what drives that. Hence, that's another reason why I'm still in therapy. I have to karaoke on stage and quit smoking cigarettes, and then I can graduate from therapy. But I've got things that, that I do now to better manage my discomfort. But I realize that that's what drives all of the bad habits, or all of the maladaptive behaviors, as they say in therapy.
Yeah,
And
no,
a lot of this too was also I had an eating disorder as well. I developed an eating disorder in high school, and it much less to do with like my body image and more to do with control, right? Like you come from a traumatic, chaotic home, it gives you some semblance of like, I can do this. But then when I became an alcoholic, it was purely driven by that. I'm like, I don't want any food in my system because I needed to absorb all of the alcohol. And so, in regards to those two medical leaves I took from work, the first one didn't work because that medical leave was for the eating disorder, and my eating disorder was not the core of my coping mechanism. It was the alcohol that had become really forefront in what I was using to manage my depression.
with,
So, like
you
I
know,
said, I got to a point where I was like, I got to do everything differently. I put myself into a sober living for 30 days out of pocket because insurance doesn't cover that. You want to get your life right? You got to pay for it yourself. Okay, who has $3,000 just randomly sitting for? Okay, all right, but I, God willing, I went to a family member, actually humbled myself and asked for it, paid him back in full, but checked myself into a sober living those last 30 days that I had of my medical leave. First 3 days of sobriety were excruciating because I was living in a sober living and I felt like I was like back in high school and I was like, what, we're grown women. What is this? What am I doing? And I had a therapy session on my third day and my therapist said, you like helping people. Why don't you just like do something else, volunteer? Instead of sitting around, not doing anything and thinking about how much you want to drink but can't. So what do you do instead? Why don't you just go help? And so I did that. I started volunteering and then I also would go to 3 meetings a day. I'd go to a meeting in the morning, a meeting in the afternoon, and a meeting in the evening. So instead of doing they say 90 meetings, 90 days, I did 90 meetings in 30 days. I've always been an overachiever. But it was also just because idle time, man. Idle time is no one's friend if you don't know how to manage the hurricane of energy the emotional energy that gets kicked up. So um, my 31st day of sobriety, I graduated from sober living and went back home and also went back to work. Um, like terrified, thinking, are they gonna know who's gonna say what? And nobody really said anything, which was nice. Really allowed me to kind of ease back into life and make my amends on time that was mine. And then I stayed in the program too for a little bit into my sobriety. It was a requirement of being in the sober living. You had to go to meetings, you had to have a sponsor, you had to be working with staffs, right? God bless them. But like about 9 or 10 months into my sobriety, I was like, this isn't. I don't need this. I'm in therapy. I'm self-aware, and like I believe in a different type of approach, and like this is so. I ended up leaving the program, but it's great. It's great for anybody who needs support. I still love going to meetings. There'll be moments where I feel a little bit disconnected, and if you want to instantly feel home and you're sober, go to some type of AA form ish meeting because man, it's the best. It's the best.
yeah, no, I mean, with just a meeting thing, I can relate because that was a big part of my early recovery. And then eventually, like, kind of like what you were saying, like I was doing all these different things. I was coaching, I had got a job working at a youth center, and I was doing these things that gave me that fulfillment and that hope. And so I just didn't feel the connection that I felt early on. And I would
Right, right.
agree, like I just recently went back to a couple meetings because I was just in a bad place myself, and I was trying to find something to give me that reconnection, and I found some hope and inspiration again going back to a couple of NA meetings and just realizing like, all right, get this I gotta keep working on myself. I stopped
Do
for
you
a
know
long
why?
time.
Do you know why the NA meeting feels like home, and why an AA meeting feels like home, or any type of those types of meetings? Do you know why they feel like home?
For
Because you are
me,
guaranteed, yeah, because you're guaranteed to find other people who prioritize their healing and their growth. That is such a small subset of the world. I feel like everybody in life, whether you have a form of addiction or not, doesn't matter, or you go to therapy or not, doesn't matter, because it's also like a form of group therapy as well. I feel like every person should go to one of those meetings. and experience that, you know?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
there it keeps everything right sized, as they say in the program. It keeps everything in perspective.
Well, and I think it, like, again, it just goes back to that connection part. You're there, you're
100%.
struggling, or you're inspiring hope, and you're doing that through sharing, and you're
Yeah.
doing that through vulnerability. Kind of going back to what we said in the beginning of this conversation, and that's what I really did enjoy about that environment, was that it,
Mhm.
it is, like you just said, like, I'm not a big part of it anymore, but I would recommend trying it out if you
Yeah.
haven't. Because it just gives you that connection that I know when I got off drugs and I got clean, I was lacking. I burned out my relationships. I had no connection with, I was trying to rebuild it with my family. I didn't have a connection with myself because I I didn't know
Right.
myself anymore after being sober for the first time in 10 years. And that helped fostered learning how to reconnect to myself as well as other people.
100%. I have a buddy of mine who actually she's been struggling, every so often with drinking and whether or not she wants to categorize herself as an alcoholic. And I suggested, I was like, go to AA. She's like, but it's Christian and they talk about God and she's Indian and she's got her own religious beliefs. And I totally respect that. And I told her, I said, there's also Dharma punks out here in LA. I said, go to Dharma punks. It's based in Buddhist philosophy. And she's like, but I'm not a Buddhist. And I'm like, it's not about that. I get it though. Trust and believe. I sat in the bathroom through so many AA meetings because every time somebody said God, my skin would crawl. We
Mhm.
all have different relationships with God and religion, and I have mine, and I get it. It kept me out of the room for a while too. But then when I swallowed my own ego and my own pride and realized that's just a word, it's conjuring a feeling
Mhm.
that's enabling me to keep harming myself. It doesn't need to be about the word. It could be about the feeling. It could be not God, but the universe or Santa Claus or whatever it is. But your life is not, life is bigger than you. So whatever that is, let it be that. And I think eventually people come to that, their own understanding of that in their own time. But it going back to like finding differences and similarities and things, it breaks my heart when I see people using differences as a reason to keep sick, to stay sick. It's like I get it though, but I get it.
Yeah, and I feel like that's it's almost encouraged to find differences from other people and then be able to point those out. Whereas, I'm listening to you share your story and share your experience, and it's just like clicking in my head of like, oh yeah, I get that. I understand.
Right?
I can relate to that. And even though there was some different experiences there, some of those triggers or that trauma that impacts us, again, it boils down to those core emotions of like pain
Right.
and
Right.
happiness or
Pain is
hope
pain is
or
pain. We
right.
bleed the same blood. At least us humans do. Aliens, they got different blood, they bleed theirs, but still, right? Like I only say that because I posted that in a video the other day and somebody said, that's not true. And then sent the little alien emoji. And I'm like, why do people always try to find something like
Mhm.
very antagonistic to say? You're putting nothing but love out in the world and somebody wants to come back and be snarky. But that's the way of the world. That's
Yeah.
why we do what we do, right?
Right, right. But I'm just kind of going back to that moment that you ended up getting sober and in that time
Mm,
that worked. Could you feel the difference going into that? Like whether it was emotionally or mentally, could you
yeah.
feel like something kind of click and either force you into saying this is what I have to do to change, or if it just kind of felt more natural for you to say like, okay, I'm finally going to put myself into this.
It was, I felt it. I knew it. You have a choice at the end of the day. Like, you could say, like, I had no choice. I had to get sober. But I did have choices, but it really didn't feel like I had choices. My pain and my pain was so intense, and was only going to become increasingly more intense if I kept living that way. And so the first time didn't work because I knew I wasn't ready. Um, and I felt like there were still other options. I think I because my dad is a military man, I follow the rules. And he put the fear of God in me. or the fear of him in me at least. And so I felt like I might lose my job. Like I said, I'm a good student. I'm a good kid. I was a good kid, a good nerdy kid. I didn't want to get in trouble in the classroom. I didn't want to get in trouble at work. And so the idea of losing my job, and again, I'm a single person. I was a single person at the it's my livelihood. How am I going to pay rent? How am I going to whatever? And so I I just felt like I had no other option. I was either going to prolong this misery and end up dead and hurting the people around me in the same way I've been hurt by the people around me, or I'd get sober and just figure it out. In some way it'll get better. And so that second time I knew it was going to be different. I just didn't know what it would look like. That first time was like a joke. I didn't volunteer for that leave actually. The first medical leave I took, one of my therapists, I think, suggested it because of the eating disorder, and that's when they sent me out to an eating disorder treatment center in Florida. Actually, I was there for 3 weeks, and my insurance was like, "She's cured." I was like, "Sucker."
Yeah. Perfect now.
So
Perfect.
that's
Everything's
actually why
good.
that first one didn't work, because it wasn't my choice. I tell people that all the time too. Like, you can want to change for other people. That's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's very noble, but it won't stick. If you decide to get sober for your kids, it's a very noble choice. But until that choice is you, or that inspiration is you, it's a precarious road that you will be on, you know? Because then everything else is sourced outside of you. And when that thing isn't there, you've got nothing in here left, right? Your kids grow up, they're gone. I still don't know how to deal with this shit that I'm feeling, but they're gone, so who cares? I've got no one I'm not gonna be a bad influence on them. They're grown. 20 years later, after 20 years sober. Who knows? Never want to put that on anyone, but like, I firmly believe that, and not in a vain way, not in a narcissistic way, not in a self-absorbed way, but like, you have to be your own source of everything. And I mean that in like a universal way almost.
Yeah, no, and I would agree with that and the reason I asked that question is just I remember that moment where my first night in rehab, and I was withdrawing. I was coming down because I didn't go to detox first.
Oh,
Yeah, and I broke out at like 2 or 3 in the morning. I was up north, so it was like 2, 3 feet of snow on the ground. And I got like 20 feet before I collapsed because I had I had no energy, nothing in me.
wow.
It was just that I laid there for a few minutes, and it was exactly what you just said. It was, all right, do I want to get up and keep walking away or running away and end up dead, or in prison for the rest of my life, or do I want to go back in there and just try? Do I want
Right.
to give it an honest try, an honest effort, and see if I can't be happy? Because I can't deal with this pain anymore. If I don't start trying
Hmm.
to figure out what's going on and ways I can heal from it, then I might as well just get up and keep running.
Right.
And I think that's a big moment, and not only getting sober, right? It could be any emotional change in our life or anything we're going through, to where we have to just kind of hit that moment of, this is what I want. This is what
Right.
I need to heal and grow from. That's why I think it's important that you said that whole focus on that, the I thing. It's you have to take care of yourself first. And if you do
Yeah.
it for yourself, it's probably going to last a lot longer than if you do it for a family member or a spouse or a kid, or just some external factor that could eventually let you down, hurt you again, be
Right.
out of your life.
Right. To your point, you said it so beautifully. You said, do I want to keep running away? That's it. You boil it down. You're uncomfortable. What do you want to do? You want to walk through it, or do you want to run away? And know that if you walk through it, you get the skills and the tolerance you need if you experience it again. But if you run away, it could come back, and you're right in the same position you were before, you
Yeah.
know?
And that's what it is. And kind of like, where you were at in that spot of embracing it and getting sober and going through that. What were those earlier moments of recovery and healing like for you? You know, was it like, were you so amped up and excited you were able to get through it? Or was it more like, oh, this is hard, but I'm seeing some benefits, so I'm going to keep going? You know, like kind of how did you approach those earlier days?
After the first 3 days, like I said,
Hmm.
excruciating, so hard. But after that, on that fourth day forward to this day, um, it hasn't been hard to not drink because it's not an option. I understand what it was doing, right? I was having a feeling I didn't like or I felt uncomfortable with, and if the alcohol would numb it, make it go away, whatever. And over time, just actually exacerbates it, makes it worse. So it's not an option. It's off the table. That part was easy. Um, but what to do then with the feelings of the energy that kicks up, that's the hard part, right? So, like I said, I was in therapy. I was doing therapy once a week, individual therapy once a week, every week. And I was also doing group therapy once a week, every week, with the same group of ladies. And so I was there. Like I said, I did the sober living, so that helped, and I did a lot of meetings. But me personally, I am an avid student of life. um, I love to learn, so I read voraciously. As many meetings as I went to in 30 days, I think, is as many books I might have read in about the same amount of time. Um, I read every single Paulo Coelho book ever written because The Alchemist is by far one of my favorite books. That's actually the first book I read. And it's funny because I'd owned the book for a while, but it was such a snob. I was like, this looks like a kid's book. Why would I read this? And then I went on a vacation and brought it with me because I don't know why, but I did, and read it. And it is the most beautiful story you'll ever read. Please read The Alchemist. Just a beautiful, beautiful story. Basically, life is for you and it's all conspiring for you. And my soul was being sung to as I read it. Like I mentioned before, I'm a writer. And so ever since I was a wee lass, I've written poetry, short stories, what have you, spoken word. And a lot of the themes and the motifs that I used to write about, despite my depression, was like peace and love and feeling the pain to heal. And so reading The Alchemist and like other books like that, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, great book if you have a hard time managing the voice in your mind and that relationship with it. Untethered Soul, Michael A. Singer, great read. Super short, super easy to read. Like accessible, I should say. Um, so I read so much. I didn't just read self-help books though. I also read like spiritual books. I read the I Ching. I read the Bhagavad Gita. I read stuff from monks, Pema Chodron. Like I just anything and everything that had to do with suffering, what it feels like, and how to get through it. I read and realized how much of that had been inside of me my whole life because so much of what I read I already knew to be true. And I'd already written about it 15 years ago, didn't even know. I thought I was creative back then. Look at me being 12 and original. No, the monks wrote this 5,000 decades ago, years ago. But yeah, because I was empty and because I was a fresh slate, I poured into myself what I wanted to exude and how I wanted to present. I I put myself in situations and acquired the tools that I needed so that I could have the skills that I thought I would need. Because here's the other thing too, fun fact. Um, I'll have been in a relationship for 4 years come June 20th. But prior to that, I was single for 15 years. I was single my whole adult life while in my alcoholism and eating disorder. Because as a product of divorce, I over the course of time knew that you have to be the kind of partner that you want to have. And I knew I couldn't be a healthy partner, and I was only going to end up being in toxic relationships. I had one crazy college relationship, and that was enough to teach me I'm not ready for this game. But but I want a partner, and I know I want somebody to rock through this life with. But I think I know what I want, or I feel like I know what I want, but I can't match it. So I, by choice, was single for 15 years to develop myself and to try to be as consistently and unconditionally as possible the type of person that I would want to engage with in any way, shape, or form, whether it be a friend or a family member or a partner or a business partner. Like I wanted to be the best version of myself so that I could attract healthier things around me. Um, and a lot of people don't necessarily take that proactivity either. Like I had one of the girls in my group therapy. She'd been there for about maybe 3 months and was like, I think I'm gonna quit, guys, because it's not working for me. We were like, girl, it's like you're getting mad at a bike. You're sitting on a bike, you're not pedaling, you're not going anywhere, and you're getting mad at the bike because you're not going anywhere. You gotta pedal, girl. You gotta do the work. You can't just expect to show up because she would never participate. She'd just come in every week and sit there quietly. Hey, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Everything's good. You gotta do the work, and again, make yourself uncomfortable. People think that once you start doing the work and you start healing, oh, I'm never going to be uncomfortable again. Ah ha ha ha. Ah ha ha. You will forever be uncomfortable because that's growth. You see babies crying when they grow because it's not comfortable. Mm. And it's time. It's fine to have periods of rest, so you can recharge and refresh before you shoot out another couple of buds. But the goal in life is not to be comfortable. It's to connect, which, to be honest, can be uncomfortable. The truth isn't always comfortable to experience. But if you can sit in it and through it and with it, with an open heart and an open mind, and have it brighten your light instead of dim it, ooh, man, you're on your way, man.
Yeah, and that uncomfortable feeling, like we've hit on, is just that's how you get to where you want to be, and
Right.
that's how you continue that pattern of growth. And like you just said, it's not always easy. It's doable, and you're gonna have those moments where it is really uncomfortable, and maybe you don't want to do it, or maybe you slip or you fall back or something. But if you continue to try, if you continue to just put yourself in that moment to try, even if it's
Yes.
just a little bit at a time, some days you're going to try a lot, some days it's going to be very, very little.
Mm-hmm.
But if you keep doing that, that's where we can find that. And again, going back to the whole connection thing, really connecting with yourself. And I think that's great self-awareness to um, be able to say, like, oh, I'm not ready for this relationship yet, and I know how
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be. It's kind of funny because I know there was one point in my life where I was like, well, why can't I hold my life together? Why is my life miserable? Oh, it's relationships. I got to stop talking to women, and I got to stop doing that. I got to cut that out as I'm getting just so drunk and so high.
Right.
That was the
It's them,
issue.
it's
It was,
this thing out
it
there.
was.
Stop
And
it.
that's
Solo.
so, yeah. And that's so funny that we find those ways to actually, because it would have been uncomfortable for me to look at myself and say, you're the problem. You got
Right.
these issues you got to heal from and deal with. And so it's funny how sometimes we try to shove other things in our face and say, oh, this is the problem. And it's just that failing or that being complicated is just a byproduct of the issues that we're trying to work through.
Totally. And it either comes from a lack of self awareness or shame.
Mm.
The lack of self awareness, I can't blame you if you don't have the tools. I can blame you if you're just choosing to be, narcissists, right? They choose to not have that. Well, I guess, I don't know. But, and the shame, it's the shame of whatever. And that's what kept me from getting sober for a long time. Outside of the depression is like the shame of all the shit I've done and people seen me do, like, it's crazy the lengths we'll go to and the webs we spin to mitigate shame and fear.
Yeah. And just real quick, that's something that's probably one of the biggest things I still deal with is just like shame from different things that have happened or different things that, I experienced in my life, and still trying to find new ways of coping. And some days I feel really good about it. And then there's just, something triggers that, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a smell, a song, a moment, I
Right,
see
right,
something,
right.
and it's just like, I gotta, I,
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I gotta keep working on this.
You get that rush or that wave throughout your body, you're like, oh yeah, wow.
This
Interesting.
sucks. But yeah, no, and kind of now seeing that journey that you've gone through, and just bits and pieces, obviously of what you've experienced and what that looked like for you. And then to have the messaging that you have today, and that positivity and that outlook, I think speaks to what that connection can do, what that
Mm,
vulnerability can do, because again, you even though, like you said earlier, yeah, you have those bad days, but you want to show that positivity and that vibrantness, right? And
Hmm.
even though you have those bad days, if you just continue to show up, if you continue to do it, you can keep putting that off. You can
I
keep
say
that
that all the time.
positivity. Yeah.
You just because you're angry or stressed or traumatized, you don't have to be an asshole. You don't have to exude. Everything is energy, right? Everything is energy. And so you are either contributing to the accumulation of positive energy or the accumulation of negative energy. Everything we do, our tone, the words we use or not, like everything. Um, and so even when I talk about in my videos, I've talked about like I'm having one of those days where I don't want to do this, but you know what? I'm still showing up and I'm being authentic, and I can have a bad day and still not be an asshole. I'm never ever. I have been so people in my life have been so cruel to me, right? Like my own family's been so cruel to me. And I made a vow to myself as a young child I would never add more of that out in the world. And so I don't. I do the work to transmute what's triggered because I understand that adding that back out there isn't going to resolve this feeling. I have to resolve this feeling. You being an asshole to me being an asshole back to you is only going to keep us on this hamster wheel. But you being an asshole to me realizing it's triggering my who do you think you are, coming out of ego going to spirit, realizing that you probably just had a bad day or whatever, you might be insecure, whatever it is. I can then realize your assholeness has nothing to do with me and it's everything to do with what you're experiencing in this moment right now. So I can just hold space and not be triggered and not engage and therefore not transmit it, but transmute it. Right. And I think all of us have that responsibility because life, I don't care who you are. You could be a Rockefeller, you could be the richest person in the world. I'm sure there's been some ugly crap in your life, right? They have a lot more means to whatever. But still, I don't care who you are. Life sucks and is hard, right? In moments. Um, it doesn't ever really get easier, right? It just, things just keep happening and you either build up tolerance to it or not. But it is our job and our responsibility as iterations of creation and different versions of itself, um, to internalize and unpack and understand what we are experiencing and transmute any of the cancerous toxic energy into light. And if you don't do that, then I'm sorry that you're sad. Because that's what that life will be, that's what that life is, where you just constantly feel unfulfilled, stuck, forever hungry, like you need more, and that's a painful place to be. It's a painful place to be. It makes me sad when I see people driven by the material, because that's not what matters. The material things gotta go, but our spirit's here, and it's all of the same.
Yeah, and as you were saying that and talking about that, I can think of something my mom always told me. She's like, life is hard enough, it can suck enough. Don't make it worse for yourself. And
Right.
I think when I would use drugs and when I would have these negative behaviors and when I would respond, like you were just talking about, you're like, oh, somebody's gonna say something to me. Well, now I'm gonna come back 10 times, harder and 10
Right.
times more aggressive. And that just made my life harder. It put me in bad situations. It put me in moments that I would either, feel shame about later on or in that. And I think kind of going with that and it's not only about, don't make your own life any harder or worse, but, realize that those actions and behaviors when I act out, it can hurt and affect other people. So then it's like,
Right.
you know, like a big thing that I've realized is just when you do those things, when you're more positive, even on bad days, when you try to just show up, it makes your life a little bit more doable, and it makes those around you, their lives and their time with you a little more doable as well.
Oh my God, 100%. You're like the ray of sunshine everybody loves. It's the best place to be, but it's like
Mhm.
it's authentic though, right?
Mhm.
Like it's going back to what you just said about lashing out and hurting other people in response. It is never okay to hurt other people's feelings because you're hurt. right? And that's what we see and that's what we do. That's what my parents did. That's what my family did. They had their hurt feelings from their traumas and they were lashing out on me. And we do that. And that's just it's not the way to go. We don't give ourselves the time to pause and ask, why am I about to say this foul ass thing that I want to say? No, you just want to hurt that person's feelings.
Mhm.
Well, they deserve it. Do they? Did you deserve to be hurt? No. So be better. So just be better and do better for you because you'll feel guilty after the fact anyway.
Yep.
You can say that you won't, but I know deep down in your spirit you'll hold on to that, you know?
You'll feel it. You'll feel it
Yeah.
later.
At some point you
Yep.
will.
But yeah, no, this has been a really wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
And again, I really appreciate your time and you coming on and sharing those experiences and your perspective. And like I said, just listening to you and learning from you, it's been awesome. And just realizing where that comes from now, those messages of positivity and those messages of just growth and self-growth and being kind that you put out there is wonderful to me, and understanding a little bit more of where that comes from and kind of how you got there. I really appreciate you sharing and showing that. So, I'm gonna put your links in the description. So definitely, if you've enjoyed this conversation, go check out Chris Elliott, doing wonderful stuff. And the messaging again. If you're having a bad day, go check her out her page. I guarantee you'll smile. Guarantee.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, and I just want to leave you with is there any last perspective, message, word that you wanna throw out there?
I do. That is, and I was serious about this earlier. No crazies. I mean, crazy's relative. I'm not trying to diminish anybody or disrespect anybody, but like cult stuff, none of that.
Yeah.
You really have any idea about farmland, living off the lay of the land? You want to retire young with family? Let's do it. You and everybody out there, like I'm excited for the day where we come back together as a community and as a family and start taking better care of ourselves and each other. So I will see you guys out there. And if you have any ideas, I'm here. Please throw them my way.
I love that. What a great way to end. So this has been Illuminate, Navigate, Radiate. Have a great rest of your day.